almost midnight. Just time for one more story. One more story before 12, just to keep us warm. In 5 minutes, it'll be the 21st of April. 100 years ago, on the 21st of April, out in the waters around Spivey Point, a small clipper ship drew towards land. Suddenly, out of the night, the fog rolled in. And for a moment, they could see nothing, not a foot in front of them. And then they saw a light, strong enough to penetrate the swirling mist. By God, it was a fire, burning on the shore. They steered toward the light. But it was a campfire, like this one. The ship crashed against the rocks, hull sheared in two, mast snapped like a twig. Wreckage, and all the men aboard went down to the bottom of the sea. There lay Elizabeth Dane, her crew, their lungs filled with salt water, their eyes open, staring into the darkness. Up above, as suddenly as it came, the fog receded back across the ocean and never came again. But it is told by the fishermen and their fathers and grandfathers that when the fog returns to Antonio Bay, the men at the bottom of the sea, out in the waters around Spivey Point, will rise up and come searching for the campfire that led them to their dark and icy death. 12 o'clock, 21st of April.
Whoa! Hey folks, Kilt-Man here, Kilt-Man at your services, and look what that hat's done to me. It's put a great big groove in me fod. Well, now, that was the opening monologue from the great John Houseman to 1978's awesome, fantastic John Carpenter supernatural ghost story, but it has murderous, leprous cadavers from the sea, marauders from beneath the waves. So although you've got ghosty elements, you've also got some kind of hard physicality as well, because these buggers, when they rise up from the depths, are wielding things like this to hook into their victims and drag them off to their deaths. It's a great film, folks. I've covered it many times. And I know, before any of you start going, "Oh, you got that line wrong there." Yes, I did get something slightly wrong there after many attempts to try and get it right. This one wasn't easy, folks. You know, if I can do the Court of King Caractacus and I can do the Quint Indianapolis speech, this one should have been dead simple. It wasn't. But I take solace from the fact that the great John Houseman, who plays old Mr Machen, the barnacled old Quint of Antonio Bay, he fluffed his lines several times. He only got him for one day. And John Carpenter said, and Deborah Hill said, the producer, who was his wife at the time, look, you know, I want John Houseman to do this. It could be great, setting the scene for the rest of the movie, this grand ghost story. Let's get John Houseman. Well, gets asked nowadays, how easy was that to get the great John Houseman? All we did was we called his agent and asked if we could do it, and he said yeah. Just a day's shoot, and it wasn't even on location, it was just in the studio as well. But it's a great speech. I love it to bits. It really sets the scene. But what's prompted this is that I love that speech. I love that the atmospherics behind it. And I've got the original novelization written by Dennis Etchinson. Awesome Dennis Etchinson, who'd done a lot of film and movie tie-ins. And I thought, I wonder, what does he say in that? Now, there it is. I got that way back in the day when the film first came out. And I'd only be a wee young scampy, that's all I would be at the time. And I got this. And if you look on the back, some lovely little pictures on the back of it. You know, Hal Holbrook there. Why not the sixth conspirator? Why not me, Blake? Why not me? And then Blake comes back at the end in the rather contrived twist ending. I know, but we love it. Oh, just 1 second. That's better. That's a wee bit better. Oh, and things could get better yet. Cheers, y'all. But I thought to myself, I wonder, how is it worded in that original novelization? Do they expand on it, or does that follow the screenplay and the script? Now, we know that The Fog went through, after his initial test run of The Fog, John Carpenter despised it and hung his head in despair and thought, it's not got anything. We've got a story, but it's going nowhere. There's no thrills, no suspense, no shock. So he went back in, after quite a bit of depression for John Carpenter. He went back into it, re-edited it, and he shot more footage. And yes, the film that we get now is considerably better than obviously what he first, encountered in the editing suite and then the test screening. And it's a great movie. It's got its faults. It's definitely got its faults. But what I find fascinating is that these movie tie-ins, and I've got many, many of them. I've got a lot of John Carpenter tie-ins as well, because Dennis Etchinson even wrote the one for Halloween 3, but he did it under the pseudonym of Jack Martin, and there it is, Halloween 3. I might do a video on these books actually, because they are interesting how they add a lot more to it. What tends to happen, or what tended to happen back in the days when these were really popular movie tie-in novelizations, the person brought in to write this, the jobbing writer, could be a great author, but they could be slumming it as well under a pseudonym writing movie tie-ins. They would get a copy of the screenplay, so they have something to work on. So the dialogue would be the same, the scenarios would be the same. That would be the plan, obviously. But sometimes they get to see the movie as well before the book was due to be written and published and put out there. So, but in the case of many of these, they didn't have a clue what was going on. And so in the likes of Halloween, which is written by Curtis Richards, or his real name was actually Richard Curtis, not Richard Curtis who writes a lot of the like Notting Hill and all that kind of stuff, but this guy, his pseudonym was, he just swapped his name, reversed his name around so people would still know it was him who was doing it. Hiding in plain sight, you could call it, but hey. Well, he added in that great druidic background to Michael Myers, why Michael Myers is this entity which can survive any crimes and physically committed against his body until the body's completely incinerated, and then the spirit will go on to something else. And it's a wonderful backstory. It's a wonderful way of telling how Michael Myers achieves all this. It's still totally supernatural. It's still totally beautiful. And I love the fact that that was based around Druids, Stonehenge, and Stonehenge is where John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were back in 1977. I think the year before they made The Fog, and they were at Stonehenge and they witnessed the fog on the periphery of the landscape. And if you've been to Stonehenge, it's a wonderfully evocative place anyway. And to give it, a luminous fog as a borderline, and John Carpenter just thought, hang on a minute, there's something about that. What could be in the fog? How could we use that? So that became the germ for the story of The Fog. Now, so again, when Dennis Etchinson got the final, he saw the movie and then he set to work on it. He did embroider things a little bit, from what I remember. It's a long time since I've read the book, but because I was thinking about that opening monologue, I thought, I wonder how that is transpired in the book, how it comes across. And it does come across quite differently. It's at the start of the movie. Mr Machen and all the kids are there. But in the film, it's a very enigmatic thing. It's on the eve of Antonio Bay's centenary. So like a big celebration to the next day. But some of the old the old salty sea dogs know, hang on a minute, something's out there, we've got to be careful, don't be tempting fate now. So, and he's telling ghost stories. He's obviously a local character who tells the ghost stories to the kids around campfires. There's a campfire like this one. Ooh. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? It's a lantern. Yes. But, I know, shock, horror. Because you didn't really think there was a blazing campfire here, did you? So, Etchinson gets the script for it, sees the movie, works on it. Mr Machen is a bigger character than what you get in the movie. Houseman was there for just a day, and they don't elaborate on it. He gets mentioned one time afterwards, and it's only in passing anyway. And he likes to frighten the kids. He's quite mocking as well, like, one more story before 12, before you run home to your mothers. And it's kind of like but little Andy, who's Adrienne Barbeau's son, Stevie Wayne from The Lighthouse, KAB, fabulous KAB, top of the world. He knows, in the book, he's like, you can see the little knowing twinkle in Mr Machen's eye that, I was a 9-year-old kid one time as well, so I understand, but I still want to frighten you all. But what I find interesting is the way that story he tells about the Elizabeth Dane, which of course we know is the ghost ship full of leprous mariners who've been given sanctuary, a piece of land which they can take, but they've got gold there which they're going to buy the land with and all that. But they get tricked and they get wrecked, basically. Not wrecked as in completely pissed out of their brains, the thing that I do all the time. They get wrecked, founder on the rocks, because it's a betrayal. And it's the town founders, really. It's the 6 conspirators. And but that is not, Mr Machen doesn't tell him that story. He says that, you get the hint that there was a campfire which lured them to their deaths. That comes across in his opening monologue, which you just heard. So that when they, the men at the bottom of the sea will rise up and search for the campfire which led them to their dark and icy death. So it's vengeance. But I'm going to read to you the version that Mr Machen tells the kids in the book, in the novelization, and it is different. And you'll see why. And it's kind of odd that it goes off in an abstract sort of way. So let's get to that now. Hang on. Where is it? Right, hang on a minute. So one of the kids has got scared. So Mr Machen is now saying, they're going like, Andy, you scared us. We thought, what did you think? That it was a black mamba? A panther, perhaps? That the ancient ones had arisen at last from the eternal sleep of Davy Jones's locker to seek their unspeakable revenge? Are you quite sure that this lad was the only thing you heard moving out there in the fog? Are you sure? Be seated, Andy. And like, what fog? Said one of the children. It was Tracy Cronenberg. Cronenberg. We won't expand on that. There's no fog tonight. I've seen fog lots of times though. I even walked all the way from school one day when it was fog, said the captain ominously. He rubbed his crooked fingers through his foam white beard, set his cap and laughed explosively. Ha 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 ha! So you think you've seen fog, do you? Do you really? Well, you haven't seen the kind of fog I've known in my day. Andy squirmed into place next to Cheryl Spears and Jeremy, the boy who lived over on Clay Street. The old man swung his gold pocket watch and opened it elaborately. 11:55, he announced. Hardly enough time. Yes, there is. So you can see how it builds up to the same sort of thing that we hear at the start of the movie. Enough time perhaps for one more story before midnight to keep us warm. That is, unless you'd rather be hurrying home to the waiting arms of your mothers. So then you get like Andy's sort of like, there's a twinkle in your eye. So let's get to the actual story itself. Tell us about the fog, said Andy. Please, sir. They all jumped when Machen snapped his watch case shut. He held it dangling by its chain, bright and bronzed in the firelight, and gazed into its shining surface as if it were etched, and as if it were the etched and timeless face of the moon, as if you meant to read its marks and find his story in the aged patterns recorded there. In 5 minutes, he began, it would be the 21st of April. 100 years ago, on the 21st of April, a great tragedy befell our peaceful community, an event so dreadful, his eyes lowered. In firelight they appeared red-rimmed, bloodshot, like my eyes every morning. Andy had never known him to hesitate before. Go on, sir. Machen shook himself out of his reverie. A possum just went over your grave, thought Andy. That's what Mrs. Capritz said whenever... That night, he continued, somewhat uneasily, out on the water by Spivey Point, a small clipper ship drew toward land. It was said that the 20 men on board were rich and carried a great coffer of gold. They had set course for Antonio Bay in search of a new home, and they had almost reached their destination, when suddenly, out of the night, Machen dropped his head, his stubble chin catching in his turtleneck. The fire breathed its last, and then there was only the ticking of the pocket watch, magnified in the stillness. Sorry, I'm trying to read this by the meagre light from my little campfire here, so a lot of the pages going into shadow. And then someone said, "It's time you knew," said the captain unsteadily. He cleared his throat. From out of the night, a fog rolled in, a thick, vaporous shroud that covered the ship and obscured the shoreline where a fire still burned. Tick, tick, tick. So already this is adding a fair bit. A fire beaming like a lonely beacon through the night and the fog. Now the ticking of the watch was drowned out by the beating of Andy's heart. A fog that no man had ever seen before. A fog so deep, so leaden, that it sat upon the ship's masts and on the shoulders of her crew like a mighty smoke from hell itself, roiling and churning all around until they could no longer see their captain's eyes, let alone the lights of the coast. A monstrous fog that took away everything and gave back naught but dark, icy death. Do you know what it is like, children, to claw and choke for air, your lungs filling with blackness, your eyes open and staring into the face of an unutterable evil? The fire hissed, a wisp of wood smoke laced the chill air. But I can say no more of what happened then within that impenetrable, devil-spawned mist, what it held in store for the men of the Elizabeth Dane. I can tell you only that later the fog rolled away, just as suddenly as it had appeared, lifting, receding back across the ocean, as if it had never existed. But the people of Antonio Bay, your grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they knew what happened that night, and they never forgot, for the fog had spoken to them. Sleep no more, it murmured from the rising of the breakers and the misshapen rocks by Spivey Point. Sleep no more. It is said that one day the same deadly fog will surely return, and then the horror of that night will rise up once again to seek its revenge, even unto the generations, bringing with it things for which there are no words, things that must come yawning up from the depths of a saltwater grave, things from which there is no earthly escape, things that reach out of the shadows closer and closer until they have you by the throat. 12 o'clock, said Machen strangely. April 21st, 100 years. Now away with you, he said gruffly. There'll be time for more stories another night, God willing. But first you must bury the embers. He kicked impatiently at the damp dirt and crossed himself. No one is to see us, not this night. That's a great version. That is a great, more elaborate version. You do get the hint that, look, these men had money. There was 20 of them on board, so you know, you're getting to know a bit more of the crew. They're seeking a new home, and they've got money. Clearly back on shore, without him saying, he's only hinting at it. The people of Antonio Bay knew about this and lured them in to rob the money, which is what the story is. But the version of that, it's telling more about the fog. You don't really know. Of course, Hal Holbrook, as Father Malone, and he's reading the journal of his forefather and all that about what happened that night. We were aided by an unearthly fog which rolled in, helping them in their demented, dreadful purpose of robbing these poor lepers. So it expands, and yet it, like the fog, it rolls in and then rolls out again. It's giving you some more information, and it's also it's telling you enough, but hinting at something which has a different sort of, narrative mechanism. And I like it. It's a nice, more elaborate version of what you hear in the film. But I can imagine if that version of John Houseman had uttered all those words, you'd have given far too much away. So in the context of a book, a novelization, that's a nice little campside story, a fireside yarn, a maritime fable with a hint of dread and warning. It's ominous, But I think in an ideal world, what you hear John Houseman say at the start of The Fog is actually far better. Obviously with the music and with, John Houseman's face.
But it is told by the fishermen and their fathers and grandfathers that when the fog returns to Antonio Bay, the men at the bottom of the sea, out around the waters of Spivey Point, rise up and search for the campfire that lured them to their dark and icy death.
So you know there's mythology there from what he's saying. You also get the impression that he knows more. He's only hinting at it. A thing about The Fog is that I hate about The Fog is that we're told right from the word go that there's only 6 conspirators, so 6 must die. And in our first, grueling horror sequence where they kill the men of the seagrass, there's 3 gone right then and there. So you're only left with 3 victims. You're going to get Dan, the weatherman. You're going to get Mrs. Cobritz. And then obviously the final one, it could be anybody, couldn't it? Because you've got Stevie Wayne fighting for a life atop the lighthouse. And you've got Tom Atkins and, what's her name from Halloween? Oh, God, it doesn't matter. Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis. Holy shit, must be the embers, the smoky embers of this. I was using strange African tribal wood for this fire. Those fumes. They conjure up images, So you've got disparate groups fighting for their lives, but as an audience member, only one more is going to die. And I do think that's a failing of Carpenter's script there. I love the film, I love its atmosphere, I love pretty much everything about it. Dean Cundy's exquisite photography, a lot of natural light in it as well. And I love the location, Port Rains, which is a place which many of you know, that's where I want to end up. I want to be living on the coast of Port Rains. So, but I just thought I'd have a little look, compare and contrast what is an iconic little seafaring monologue at the start of a great horror movie. I mean, you've got another seafaring barnacle old Bill delivering a great horrific seafaring fable with Quint and the USS Indianapolis in Jaws, of course. And I've covered that how many times? I wonder, what would it be like if they'd recruited old Mr. Quint to play old Mr. Machen and tell that tale? I think there could be grounds for another wee video there, perhaps. Who knows? But it would be very interesting to see what he'd come up with for a tale of ghoulish fog rolling out across the sea. So folks, anyway, look, John Carpenter's novelizations are great. I've got a few of them, Escape from New York, and there's the Halloween one, obviously, which is awesome. And I've got The Thing as well, Alan Dean Foster. Alan Dean Foster's version is different again, but his is different because he based it on one of the earlier scripts from Bill Lancaster, so it has elements of a chase out across the ice, which you do not see in the finished movie, of course. But it's a great action sequence as well, and a great suspense sequence. But they ditched that entire episode from the final shooting script. And obviously Escape from New York has other elements in it as well. The Fog certainly has that different elaboration of Machen's speech. And it's interesting in its own right, but you're getting, as I say about The Fog, rolls in, rolls back out. The two speeches, elements roll into one and then roll back out, just leaving tantalizing clues. And in the finished version from John Houseman, it gives a less descriptive. There's no elder gods. It doesn't talk about what the fog does to people sitting on their shoulders and filling their lungs with ancient darkness and evil. It doesn't do any of that. But it just paints the way very succinctly for a rather abstract and sometimes quite surreal horror movie. Both work a treat within their own context. So folks, anyway, that wasn't a pocket watch. As usual with all my props, we have a gold pocket watch which my father-in-law, Mrs. Kilt-Man's dad, gave to us many years ago, and it's gorgeous, probably worth a fair bit as well. And I said to her, "Oh, have you got that pocket watch?" Couldn't find it. So it's a mirror, you know, but it still serves the purpose. Oh.
11:55.
Anyway, folks, I have been and always shall be at your own kilted yet barnacled services. I love these seafaring tales. I love these supernatural fables. Don't you? They're just so gloriously creepy, ominous, infectious, and addictive. So, I think you're going to see Quint's interpretation of the John Houseman monologue from The Fog. A monologue from The Fog! Folks, I have been and always shall be at your services. Please keep it kilted, keep it Celtic. And watch out for the fog. It's always out there, loitering just beyond the horizon, bubbling away. But one day it'll return to Antonio Bay. Folks, I'm going to see you all. Namaste. Oh, fire still on.